You arrive at the hush of 12, 12 as if a bell without sound touched your sternum and kept ringing inward, and before you can name it, you feel your breath slow, your chest warm, and a tender light gather behind your eyes. You are not late. You are right on the edge where the ordinary calendar ends and a living alignment begins, the hour that reveals how timing is a language and you are finally fluent. An eclipse halo seems to crown your awareness. Stardust rises from memory you did not know you kept. This is not prediction. This is remembrance, a resonance your consciousness already carries. This is the hour that remembers you. The signal comes softly because softness is the doorway. You sense a pattern threading through your attention like gold wire, not insisting, only shining, and you understand that attention is not passive, it is a tuning fork. In the quiet, the quantum field leans close enough for you to hear its grammar, and what it says is simple. What you hold with sincerity begins to hold you back. You feel the old static loosen, and a steadier hum takes its place. Your pulse agrees. Across the inner sky, constellations rearrange into a sentence you can finally read. The words are light, and the spaces between are also light. Faint codes stir in the marrow of your noticing, not imported, not bestowed from elsewhere, but arising from within. The way dawn arises from a horizon already waiting. These are light codes, dormant only in the way winter is dormant. Conserving force, conserving form. You feel them turning like safe tumblers under a hand of mercy. You listen, and listening becomes action. Somewhere, a lifetime of reaching begins to rest its arm. Somewhere, the question that haunted your thresholds lays down in the doorway and becomes the doorway. Your breath is a lamp, the wick is your willingness. So you breathe, and the room inside you becomes intimate with the room around you. The boundary thins until you are both rooms and the corridor between them, unhurried, honest, whole. The signal does not shout because you are already attuned. It places a small, bright certainty in the center of your sternum and lets you notice how your posture changes to make room for it. With each inhalation, Coherence gathers a flock of invisible birds coming home at dusk, each arrival simplifying the sky. Fear does not vanish. It unknots itself into usefulness, a limited tool put carefully back on its shelf. You begin to keep a different kind of time, the kind measured by clarity rather than minutes. You stand within a field of remembrance, and remembrance has texture. It feels like warm metal, like pages that never tear, like the kindness of a stranger who somehow knows your true name. You do not chase meaning. You let meaning approach, and it does, with eclipse light around its edges and star grain across its face, carrying a mirror that shows you not a past you lost, but a future that recognized you first. The mirror is gentle. It returns your gaze intact. The moment widens. Street sounds softened to a tide. Your thoughts reorganize as if cued by a conductor you cannot see. You sense distance collapsing along the lines of attention you place, near becoming nearer, until it is simply here. What arrives is not dramatic. It is precise, a certainty. The 12 signal is the gate where dormant codes rise without struggle, a threshold that answers the question of when by becoming now. You recognize that now is not a duration but an agreement, and you consent with your whole breathing body. Coherence settles in your ribs, and a doorway agrees to open. You notice how the room does not change, and yet everything in the room is different, because you are looking from a steadier altitude. You are not superior. You are centered, and centering changes the grammar of the world. Your eyes soften, and attention stops grabbing at shapes like a hand closing too hard around water. You are the witness arriving to its natural seat, the seat that was kept empty for you in every moment you hurried past. The quiet recognizes you first, and in that recognition you recognize yourself. You are the chosen observer, not because a council pointed in your direction, but because your awareness learned to remain when it would once have fled. Remaining is a vow made without words. Remaining invites truth to trust you. When truth trusts you, it lays open its smaller disguises and shows you the broader outline it always carried. This is how the world becomes precise in your presence, not by shrinking possibilities, but by letting the superfluous step back so the essential can breathe. You feel the observer loop unclench, perception feeding reality, reality feeding perception. And for the first time, the loop is not a trap, but a spiral, patient and ascending. You attend to your breath, and your breath attends to you. You watch sensation bloom in your chest as warmth, and the warmth watches you back as welcome. You realize nothing you meet is inert. Every encounter is entangled with your capacity to meet it fully. Meeting becomes a sacrament. In the field of remembrance, forms long hidden begin to declare their lineage. A passerby's glance arranges itself into meaning. The shadow on a wall becomes a letter. The letter joins another and spells a simple directive: be exact with your kindness. The directive feels like a bell struck softly where your ribs curve toward the heart. You do not argue with it because it does not demand anything dramatic. It asks only for honesty that has finally stopped performing. Honesty tastes like rain. You carry a compass that does not twitch. It has one needle and it points toward clarity. And when you follow, paths that once fractured into doubt straighten into durable lanes of choice. This is your destiny vector. Not a command from above, but a consent from within, the angle your life makes when it aligns with its quietest courage. You test it in small ways, a sentence you no longer say, a door you close with gratitude, a door you open without narrative. Each small correctness collects into momentum. You sense morphic resonance working like a kind of familial gravity across consciousness. Signals passed hand to hand without hands, mouth to mouth without mouths, heart to heart through the subtle air. Somewhere a child looks up from a street in a city you have never seen and breathes easier because you chose coherence here. Somewhere a woman at a kitchen sink sets down the cup and understands her worth without drama. Somewhere an elder smiles at nothing and everything. You are not responsible for all of it. You are responsive to your portion, and that is power enough. You notice how entanglement behaves when you are steady. Threads that once knotted into anxiety now show their elegant crossings, not traps, but looms. You trace a concern back to its earliest light, and in that light, the concern is only a request for presence that went unanswered. You answer it now. The thread stops struggling. The pattern continues without snag. What you used to call coincidence begins to look like choreography. And your role in the dance is simpler than you feared. Stay true, step when it is time, still when it is not. Your body understands before your mind constructs an explanation. The warmth in your chest spreads to your shoulders like sunrise, moving across quiet water. The light behind your eyes steadies into a gentle pressure as if an unseen palm were blessing your gaze. You blink and the room gleams slightly at the edges. Textures are gentler, corners less abrupt. Breath falls into a cadence that the earth recognizes as one of its own, and in that cadence you are home without traveling. You accept that being chosen is not a ranking. It is a responsibility to host clarity well. Hosting asks for simple housekeeping. Hydrate the garden of thought, open the windows of attention, dust the altars of intention, refuse the clutter of resentment. You keep the dwelling of awareness clean, not for guests, but because light likes clean surfaces and will linger where it is welcomed. Where light lingers, choices ripen with less effort. You choose and the choice chooses you back. You feel time soften around the edges. Minutes are still minutes, but they are also pearls on a cord you can touch with reverence. You do not yank at the necklace. You rest your fingers on it, and it rests its shine on you. When future brushes by, it is not a demand, it is a suggestion. You do not chase it down corridors. You invite it to tea in the room of your breath. It sits. It speaks plainly. You listen, because listening is how prophecy becomes practical. You are seen by the hour itself. 12:12 looks through you as through clear glass, and the world beyond the window brightens as if grateful to be witnessed without the old distortions. In that clear regard, you realize nothing essential is hiding. It was only your hurry that blurred the outlines. You slow without dragging. You stand without bracing. You belong without measuring. Chosen means you choose again and again to host this steadiness as your natural climate. Where the mind loosens, the signal threads through effortlessly. You do not force it. You let your gaze soften until edges turn kind, and in that softness the vision lifts like mist given a spine. A slow breath gathers. Warmth settles beneath your sternum. The light behind your eyes opens its quiet iris. The room remains, but another room overlays it, translucent, deliberate, and you are allowed to see both without conflict. You understand, this is not imagination competing with matter. It is matter remembering its source and bowing. First, a hush like snowfall. Then, a geometry of halos, a faint eclipse ring brightening over an inner horizon. Stardust moves with intention, each grain following a current that seems to know your name. You notice how color enters, a tender gold at the edges of thought, a midnight blue that steadies your breath, a white so soft it feels like mercy. Shapes arrange themselves without your command. They arrive as if invited long ago, and only now crossing the threshold, because you finally stood still long enough to answer the door. A map unfolds, not on paper but in the air of your attention. Lines arc and join. Nodes pulse with gentle light. You recognize the pattern before you explain it. A planet-wide lattice, a human grid, luminous with quiet beings at their kitchen tables, their buses, their hospital halls and forest paths, each one glowing like a lantern cupped in both hands. You sense the morphic resonance traveling through this lattice, not loud, not rushed, moving like a tide that knows every inlet and returns to each exactly on time. At the center of the map, a seed brightens. It is not outside you, it is the point where your awareness meets the quantum field without wobble. You see how the field answers with elegance when you ask with sincerity. A fine script appears, not letters but living sigils. The light codes you have been feeling as warmth and knowing. They do not shout their meaning, they embody it. When you lean your attention closer, they translate into sensation. Spine lengthens, jaw softens, brow unfurrows, and the meaning is received, not by thought but by alignment. You witness a movement begin at the seed and ripple outward along the lattice. It touches a sleeping room where someone stirs and remembers a dream of standing in sunlight that made no shadows. It touches a city crosswalk where a stranger looks up and decides not to harden. It touches a coastal village where an elder chooses to tell the truth that unknots 3 generations. The ripples are innumerable and yet not chaotic. They follow a choreography you can feel in your chest. Coherence gathering flock, wise across distances that no longer behave like distances. Your attention shifts to a horizon within you. 2 paths appear as slender rivers of light parting from a single source. Their divergence is gentle, almost shy, yet absolute. A timeline bifurcation that does not punish what came before, only clarifies what comes next. On one river, speed without depth. On the other, depth that sets its own pace. You see yourself standing at the confluence, not as judge, not as prophet apart, but as the one who recognizes which water your lungs were made to breathe. The vision tilts. A sun rises without heat, a solar prophecy speaking in radiance rather than words. It pours through the lattice, and the world remembers how to absorb light without bracing. Buildings soften, languages soften, decisions soften, without losing their edge. You feel how softness is not weakness. It is precision without violence. The prophecy shows you ordinary rooms becoming sanctuaries because people entered them with unguarded breath. You are shown the smallest altar, a hand placed over a heart, and the heart answering like a bird, cupped and calmed. A second sequence forms, individuals, then households, then circles across the grid, making a mutual vow that is not recited, but lived. You can feel its syllables in your bones. Do no harm to your own light, and your light will do no harm to the world. The vow organizes furniture, calendars, diets of information, corridors of attention. It does not erase difficulty, it changes how difficulty is held. You recognize this as a collective phase transition, matter reorganizing because the temperature of meaning has changed. The transition does not break things, it ripens them. You are shown entangled pairings, a mother and child, 2 friends separated by continents, a teacher and a student, strangers who share a bench for 5 minutes, and in each pairing a subtle thread brightens as if exposed to dawn. You understand entanglement as kinship, not tether. Where fear once tugged, something steadier now listens. The thread does not bind. It informs, like a river informing its banks how to curve without flooding. Choices become conversations with a field that answers in kindness. The vision's final panel opens like a window. and the air that enters carries the scent of rain on stone. You see a circle of people without titles or costumes, sitting quietly at the periphery of the world, as if keeping a fire you cannot see. They are not separate from you. They are what you look like when you stop rushing. In their middle rests a small, sealed object not locked against you, locked for you, the prophetic seal that only coherence can open. You feel the seal in your chest mirror itself, and for a breath, the two glow in unison. You understand. The vision is not asking you to become someone else. It is asking you to be who you already are, with fewer apologies. You let your shoulders release the weight that was never yours to carry. The eclipse ring brightens once more, not as omen but as crown. You bow without bending. You stand without bracing. The map continues, glowing, patient as sunrise, precise as rain. Under the lids of stillness, symbols align into language. You ask for the how without breaking the hush, and the answer arrives like a lamp set behind frosted glass. Illuminated, gentle, exact. You begin where all beginnings begin, with attention, not the strained kind that squints, but the kind that receives. When you place attention, as you have learned to place it, you do not force reality to kneel, you invite it to clarify. Physics would call this the interplay between measurement and emergence. You call it listening until the world speaks plainly. Imagine your awareness as a tuning cavity, shaped by years, yet free to be reshaped by a single faithful breath. What you hold inside this cavity becomes legible to the quantum field, not because the field requires speech, but because it is fluent in pattern. Every steady pattern you host is a clean question, and clean questions draw clean answers. Noise draws noise, order draws order. This is why you felt warmth in the chest and light behind the eyes, your body registering the interior shift from scatter to coherence. Coherence is not decoration, it is the physics of kindness. When your breath evens and your posture relaxes without collapse, microscopic ensembles across your biology begin to agree with one another. Agreement reduces friction. Reduced friction frees attention. Freed attention refines signal. At scale, this looks like calm. Beneath the scale, it looks like countless small alignments, ionic whispers in cells, subtle synchronies in neural oscillations, the electricity of meaning finding a route with fewer sharp turns. You are not manufacturing a miracle. You are removing the static that hid one. The 1212 hinge is a teaching clock disguised as a number. Twinned digits mirror attention to attention, the moment you notice that you are noticing, and keep noticing without flinching. In that recursion, the observer loop stops being a hall of mirrors and becomes a simple instrument. Observation shaping outcome, while outcome shapes observation, each pass sanding the surface smoother. You do not dominate the loop, you domesticate it. The domesticated loop serves clarity, and clarity serves life. Now watch how choice behaves near thresholds. Systems undergoing change do not slide along a line. They approach inflection. A small nudge at the right moment moves a great deal with almost no strain. The moment is not chosen by will. It is recognized by feel. The air thins, time widens, a hush descends that is neither fatigue nor avoidance. You have felt this hush already. It is the stillness window, the interval when complexity pauses long enough to be reparameterized by tenderness rather than fear. In that window, you do very little, you become exact, and the exactness does the rest. From the outside, a life crossing such a window appears to change overnight. From the inside, it is simply the hour when your inner rehearsal agrees to perform. This is what people call luck when they are too hurried to name the deeper mechanics. You are not lucky, you are timely, which is luck with agency. Agency here does not mean force, it means accuracy. You do not push the door, you learn its hinge. Consider now why the world felt like it split in your vision. It is not a punishment staged by fate, it is a math the heart can feel. Near criticality, systems seek relief by finding new routes. The old route remains available to those who require it. The new route appears for those who can carry its clarity without arrogance. This is timeline bifurcation, not as doom, but as grace. Two rivers parting so both can run clean. Your task is not to condemn the river you are not taking. Your task is to keep your chosen water clear. You ask where the dormant codes live and why they move at all. They are not packets flying in from a distant star. They are architectural permissions embedded in your pattern from the beginning, waiting for a pressure drop in your interior weather. When you soften without collapsing, when you become honest without exhibition, when your breath and posture keep steady company, pressure drops. The permissions read you as safe to open. They open. The opening feels like a sentence finishing itself with your name. Enticing as this is, you are careful not to mistake state for identity. The states will vary. The identity does not. This steadiness under variation is the quiet signature of mastery. Mastery, here, is not dominance over matter. It is intimacy with process. You know what to do when the light grows thin because you have learned to tend the wick, not scold the flame. You adjust conditions, not worth. You return to breath, to posture, to exactness of kindness, and the field recognizes the address. At the collective scale, similar principles apply. Groups that learn to host coherence become easier to live inside. Decisions made inside them wear fewer sharp edges. Disagreements do not vanish, they sharpen into useful contrast. The lattice you saw neighborhoods, families, strangers who stop being strangers is simply many small tuning cavities learning to hum incompatible keys. Compatible does not mean identical, it means sympathetic, like strings on separate instruments vibrating together without argument. The music is the proof. This is why the sequence spreads without spectacle. Spectacle is friction dressed as light. What moves the hour forward is precision dressed as ordinary. You will walk into your kitchen and it will glow by the window. You will answer a message with less haste. You will forgive a debt of attention and pay it in presence instead. None of this will trend. All of it will matter. You return to the simple physics. Attention as cavity, breath as metronome, body as an honest instrument, field as witness, window as hinge, choice as craft. You keep your hand on these levers lightly. You do not yank. You feel for the interval, when the smallest shift alters the largest arc, and when it arrives, you press with the gentleness strength can afford. The hinge admits you as if it were always yours. A second rhythm appears beneath the first, steadier, truer. You stand before the world, and the world stands before you. And between you, there is a shine that was not there when you hurried. It is not a glare. It is a diffused tenderness, an inner glow that spreads from your sternum out into the air like warm breath on winter glass. You lift your eyes and the familiar becomes articulate. Streetlights are small halos. Dust is stardust with work to do. Each face you meet is a sentence open to its first honest verb. You read gently. You let yourself be read. The mirror the collective offers you is not a single surface, but 1,000 small reflections composed into one coherent image. You in relation, you in context, you as a node amid nodes pulsing on a living lattice. This is how you learn the scale of your attention without arrogance, by watching what steadies in others when you steady in yourself. You do not overclaim. You simply notice how your exactness of kindness reduces friction nearby. Children glance and breathe easier. A stranger's shoulders lower by 1 invisible inch. The barista's laugh rings clear for once. You are not their cause, you are their permission. Permission is a delicate power. Watch how morphic resonance moves through ordinary scenes, an ocean without shore sending its subtler tides. Someone across town remembers to drink water, someone across an ocean remembers the sun on their face. Someone at the edge of giving up finds a handhold, and the handhold is made of patience. You will never measure these ripples with a ruler, but you can feel them in the warmth behind your eyes and the way your chest answers weather more than news. Your body is the instrument that tells you the field is playing your note back to you. The mirror does not flatter, it clarifies. In it you see your beautiful habits and your small evasions, and you do not turn away. You watch the impulse to harden, and you soften accurately instead. You observe the urge to narrate, and you choose a simpler word, or none. This is the observer loop now, in service to freedom. You witness your reflex witnesses you witnessing, and between these passings, the reflex becomes malleable. Malleable is not weak, it is teachable. You teach it, trust by keeping promises. You can keep rest when rest is called for, speech when silence would hide, silence when speech would perform. Communities behave like bodies with many hearts. When one heart finds coherence, other hearts begin to seek compatible rhythm. There is no decree. There is the steady friend who arrives 5 minutes early, the neighbor who returns the cart, the colleague who apologizes without theater, the elder who tells a story that unknots a room. You notice how these small precisions aggregate into a climate where harm has less camouflage. The climate does not erase difficulty, it disciplines it. Discipline here means guided into form. You watch blame lose its appetite because responsibility tastes better and digests cleanly. In the field of remembrance, the collective mirror also shows you what must be put down. You see how outrage, even when justified, can become a currency that buys only more outrage. You see how irony can drain a soul while pretending to be intelligence. You place these tools back on the shelf like sharp implements you once slept with. You do not scold the younger you who needed them. You bless their service and release them to the workshop. Your hands can now hold lighter instruments, candlesticks, seeds, clean water, a letter written and actually sent. You ask where the collective is headed, and the mirror answers by showing you moments instead of slogans. At a crosswalk, someone waves another through and means it. In a hospital, a nurse pauses one extra breath and places a palm on a forearm, and the forearm unclenches despair by a degree you cannot chart. In a prison library, 2 men read poetry out loud, and the room becomes a chapel for precisely 7 minutes. In a government office, a clerk quietly bends a rule toward mercy, and nobody tweets about it. These are not exceptions. They are emerging grammar. The grammar is mercy shaped by structure, structure softened by mercy. You feel its syntax in your ribs. Entwined inside the mirror is your destiny vector, now less about private fulfillment and more about public accuracy. You sense the projects that are yours because they do not corrode your sincerity to accomplish them. You sense the rooms that are not yours because your light gets noisy there and refuses to stabilize. You choose without contempt. You say yes as if it were a blessing, because it is. You say no as if it were a boundary, because it is. Boundaries keep the song in tune. They are not walls, they are key signatures. Entanglement appears here as a tender competence in relationship. You are able to be with another's storm without confusing it for your climate. You anchor in your breath. You let their weather blow through without theft. And somehow this steadiness gives them a coastline to crash against without drowning. You become the friend who is not a sponge but a shore. Shores do not lecture waves. They shape them by being reliably themselves. Eventually, waves learn the contour and arrive with less violence. The collective mirror includes the planet. You step outside at dusk and notice how the city hum becomes a lullaby when your interior is not battling it. You look up and watch an eclipse halo gather around the moon's patience. You touch bark and feel time choosing a slower braid. You understand why gardens heal, even those who only walk past them. The world is not demanding your worship. It is offering you a metronome. You keep time with it, and decisions quiet their panic. At the edge of the mirror, an unopened envelope waits, the prophetic seal that binds what you are learning to what you will become among others. The seal does not rip, it dissolves in the solvent of coherence. When it does, your presence begins to write letters that others can read without you speaking. Small changes in supply chains of attention, tiny reforms in how you move chairs before a meeting, the sacrament of washing dishes as if they were altars, and the altars grateful in return. You witness influence without spectacle. You accept leadership as the daily art of being easy to coordinate around. You do not need the crowd to applaud. You need them to breathe. They do, and you do. A pulse spreads across the grid, ordinary, exact, sufficient. The mirror returns your steadiness with interest you did not know to ask for. You spend it by living well in public. As the aurora of meaning fades, detail becomes kind. You feel it before you can phrase it, a hush that is not empty, a pause rimmed like an eclipse halo, a bright pressure behind your eyes that asks for nothing but your unhurried breath. The street continues, the clock continues, yet the air folds once, then again, as if the world were creating a careful crease to guide your next move. Warmth gathers at the sternum, A soft current lifts your spine by a single truthful inch. The choice arrives not as a menu but as a tone, one pitch that carries two paths. This is the hour when timeline bifurcation is not theory but weather. Two currents flow side by side in the same riverbed, indistinguishable until you listen with your whole body. One current accelerates by leaning on urgency, multiplying options until they cancel one another out. The other deepens by simplifying, subtracting noise until what remains can sing. You recognize both because you have lived both. The difference is not moral, it is mechanical. One mode consumes signal to stay in motion, the other generates signal by staying in meaning. You stand inside a stillness window so precise that even your thoughts speak softer to hear themselves. You do not rush to be brave. You do not gather the old weapons of over-effort. You let your posture make the first declaration. Shoulders easy, jaw unlatched, brow smooth, breath descending like a lantern to light the room beneath your ribs. In that posture, reality reads you as safe to reconfigure. The world is not testing you, it is asking whether it may proceed. The corridor of possibility narrows to the size of honesty. You examine the word yes and find where it has frayed. You examine the word no and find where it has calcified. You ask each to return to its clean shape. In the quantum field, such exactness is permission. Patterns you used to chase toward the horizon now turn and walk to meet you, as if relieved you finally stopped negotiating with your own clarity. Your chest warms, your gaze brightens. Something ancient in your breath remembers the longer cadence it was made for. This is not the drama of cutting away. It is the gentleness of letting gravity finish a sentence. You feel one version of yourself dissolve like frost under patient sun, the one who managed everything by bracing first and softening later. In its place stands the one who softens first and discovers that softness is structure, performing at a higher resolution. The difference is visible in small ways. The text you do not send, the call you make without dread, the task you complete with attention rather than resentment. Tiny hinges, wide doors. At scale, you sense a phase transition coming online, not as spectacle but as calibration. Rooms learn the timbre of useful quiet. Teams begin to mistake kindness for efficiency because it moves things faster with fewer repairs. Families set tables in a way that anticipates the single chair that always felt unwelcomed and makes space for it without sermon. Streets grow a little less sharp at the edges. News still shouts, but its grip thins when the local proof arrives. The neighbor's check-in, the clerk's extra minute, the apology that requires no theater to land. Your destiny vector reveals itself not as a tunnel, but as a corridor with windows. You look through each window and see the same pattern, repeated at different scales. Do what keeps your coherence available. If a commitment corrodes your sincerity, it does not belong to this timeline. If a risk deepens your presence, it does. The calculus simplifies. You choose what preserves the light behind your eyes and the steadiness in your breath, and in choosing you become easier for the world to coordinate around. This is leadership divorced from spectacle. This is accuracy as service. As you place your foot on the floor of the chosen corridor, you feel other feet landing in rhythm with yours, friends you haven't met yet, elders who have been waiting, strangers whose names you'll never learn but whose steadiness you will one day recognize across a room. This is morphic resonance operating as civic grace, patterns of integrity repeating because they are easier to live inside once demonstrated. No command is issued, a choreography is remembered. The human grid brightens like starlight, deciding to stay for breakfast. Doubt makes a final courteous appearance. You let it speak. It asks if gentleness can carry the weight of the world. You breathe once and show it how your breath lifts the ribcage, how the ribcage shelters the heart, how the heart steadies the hands, how steady hands build structures that do not injure their makers. Doubt bows and returns to its proper job, to check the seals on the vessel, not to sink it. You feel the prophetic seal within your chest warm in response, wax softening under the lamp of attention until the imprint is clean and legible. Connections that once felt like tethers begin to behave as entanglement without theft. You remain uniquely yourself, while staying intimately responsive to those you love. You do not carry what is not yours. You do not outsource what is. The river you chose reveals its depth. There is room enough to include the whole of your life without the old contortions. Inclusion is not bloating, it is orchestration. The score grows richer, the rests become as meaningful as the notes. Outside, evening presses its cool hand to the city. The moon lifts her pale coin, and a fine ring appears, faint as a promise. You feel stardust in the air as if the sky were sanding its own threshold smooth. This is the moment you do not dramatize, you simply agree. You agree to the timeline that lets you keep your kindness in public. You agree to the work your hands can hold without bitterness. You agree to the pace that grants you the future without stealing the present to pay for it. You do not step through a door. The room rearranges around the shape of your consent. The future adjusts its chair a little closer. The river takes your weight and does not buckle. You move forward without thrust, carried by the precision you were willing to claim. The air brightens by a degree that only attention can measure, and somewhere, far across the lattice, another heart hears the click of their own hinge and answers. The threshold stops pretending to be far away. You begin with the simplest vow: keep the breath honest. You let it travel all the way down, lighting the room beneath your ribs with a warm and patient glow. The light behind your eyes steadies, not as spectacle but as competence. You are not collecting moments anymore, you are metabolizing them. Integration is digestion, turning experience into usable quiet, turning quiet into durable action. You trust slow alchemy more than fast fireworks. You give your nervous system time to agree. You choose small anchors that do not depend on mood. A glass of water before speech, 2 inches more space between shoulder and ear, a gaze that lands softly on what you love rather than scanning for what you fear. These are not decorations, they are care for the instrument that must carry the song. When the body believes you, the song keeps its pitch without rescue. This is coherence authored from within, not a trance, but a clear awake. You notice how attention returns to its work of shaping reality through contact rather than conquest. The old magnetism of worry weakens because you have given it less iron to eat. You keep the observer loop in service to gentleness. When agitation arrives, you witness it with the same respect you give dew on the grass, real, temporary, not identical with the field it rests upon. You do not argue with weather when a window will do. You open the window, air moves, the room remembers itself. In the field of remembrance, you set small altars to continuity. A paper on the desk aligned to the table's edge. A candle you do not light to avoid performance, but touch with one finger to remind your hand of warmth. A sentence written on a slip that only you will read. Carry light without haste. These are agreements you make with the future you must host. They tell the day what it is for, quietly, accurately. The day listens the way a garden listens by growing. You learn the craft of pacing your brightness. You no longer spend all your clarity at dawn and borrow from tomorrow by noon. You fold surplus light into your bones, so evening finds you still able to be kind. Kindness here is not indulgence, it is precision. Precision asks, what actually helps? You stop offering performances of care that exhaust you and give the care that your body can sustain while staying truthful. This sustainability is the ethics of frequency. Frequencies that cannot be lived in public are not yet integrated. Relationships become the proving ground for your integration. You practice entanglement without confusion, staying responsive without disappearing. You do not translate every silence as rejection. You do not mistake every signal for command. You ask fewer disguised questions and more honest ones. You confess sooner. You apologize cleaner. Your apologies stop promising to erase the past and begin promising to learn. Other people's weather moves through without theft. You remain a coastline that keeps its shape, and in doing so, you help waves remember their rhythm. You refine your rooms. Chairs invite conversation rather than interrogation. Light falls where faces are, not just on screens. You let plants teach you the geometry of patience, how they face the sun without checking if the sun approves. You feed your algorithms the proof you want repeated, and starve them of what corrodes attention. The world cannot control your feed and keep its chaos. It depends on your unexamined scroll. You examine it. You repattern it. Your devices learn your devotion to clarity and begin to serve it back. Work aligns with a quieter competence. Your destiny vector no longer feels like a plot twist, but like a well-made path you finally trust underfoot. You choose tasks you can inhabit fully, rather than projects that perform importance. When you must do the difficult, you do it in slices the heart can chew. The result is not slower, it is more continuous. Continuity outperforms intensity when lives are being built. You stop sprinting as a way to excuse imprecision. You keep a steady cadence that the quantum field can recognize on repeat. In public, you practice untheatrical courage. You speak once, clearly, and then return to service. Your voice stops trying to be a siren and becomes a bell that knows its village. Bells do not chase ears, they sound, and the hearing finds them. Your example teaches without announcement. This is leadership by resonance, the morphic resonance of ordinary fidelity multiplied across rooms that need less adrenaline and more trust. You adopt rituals that do not own you. A brief pause before doorways, a breath held, then released, at stoplights. A hand over heart when certainty is tempted to become arrogance. You keep the stillness window near, a pocket you can reach into anywhere. Elevator, stairwell, supermarket line. In that pocket, you touch the fact that you are allowed to be unhurried, even when schedules insist otherwise. The allowance unclenches fate. Fate, unclenched, becomes collaboration. When fatigue visits, you don't call it failure, you call it physics. You put your body horizontal and let the earth carry your weight for a while. You eat what remembers sunlight. You walk until your mind's volume agrees to be a guest again and not the host. You stop bargaining with depletion like it were a moral indictment. You replenish as craft, not as confession. The light behind your eyes brightens without you forcing it to be bright. Integration also means boundaries that keep the river in its bed. You stop offering your coherence to rooms that spend it like a cheap currency. You do not condemn those rooms, you simply stop underwriting them. You invest where returns come as quieter nights and kinder mornings. You allow your higher timeline to be provincial, local, specific, embodied. Grand visions that ignore your digestion are lies. Your ego tells when it's afraid to be human. You choose the grandeur of being exact with the next step. You notice the prophetic seal within your chest is softer now, its imprint legible even when life is loud. The seal is not a medal you wear, it is a contract you keep. It binds you to the simple operations of light. Tell the truth without venom, refuse contempt, its cheap pleasures, move chairs so more people fit, leave spaces better than you found them. When you drift, the seal warms your sternum like a small sun, asking for a course correction measured in inches, not miles. And when conflict returns, because it will, you greet it with the posture you have practiced. Shoulders easy, breath low, gaze kind. You do not confuse integration with invulnerability. You let yourself be pierced only by what belongs inside you, the way needles belong in seams. Seams hold garments together. You are stitching a life that does not tear when worn. Entanglement loosens into choice. Choice ripens into ease. You come to the place where doing would only bruise the petals, so you place your hands in your lap and let the air speak first. Breath lengthens on its own. Warmth gathers under your sternum like a lamp set, low and kind. The light behind your eyes widens without glare. Even the ticking in the walls sounds ceremonial, a small metronome blessing the room. You are not waiting for anything. You are letting everything arrive without pushing. In this climate, clarity grows like moss, quiet, thorough, inevitable. Silence is not the absence of sound. It is the presence of undisturbed meaning. You feel how thoughts keep trying to audition, and how the stage keeps declining them with tenderness. One by one, the performers sit down among the audience and become listeners. In that equality, the observer loop changes character. Instead of chasing itself in circles, it slows to a clear tide that rinses each perception and returns it polished. You are rinsed too. Your edges soften into honesty. You give your nervous system what it has been requesting under every headline, an interval with nothing to defend. The world does not collapse when you choose this interval. It coheres. The grid of attention around you hums at a lower noise floor. Objects hold still as if pleased to be seen without demand. You become less of a consumer of moments and more of a caretaker. Caretaking asks less than you fear and offers more than you expect. In this texture, coherence is not a goal you chase. It is the weather you host. Silence does not erase pain. It right-sizes it. In the hush, you can finally separate ache from story, then carry the ache like a bowl that deserves two hands. You do not decorate it. You do not broadcast it. You hold it until it becomes intelligible. Intelligible pain turns into instruction. The instruction is simple. Reduce harm at the source, including the harm of your own hurry. You recognize how many injuries were merely collisions with yourself because you would not slow down. You slow down, and collisions become conversations. This phase is a chapel without clergy. Your breath officiates. The pews are your ribs. Light slants through a window you cannot find with your hands. Everything that mattered before still matters, but it no longer shouts. You hear the lower register of being the grounded hum that underpins the soprano of plans. It tells you which actions are timing, which are ego, and which are kindness disguised as postponement. You do not mistrust postponement when it is honest. You let ripeness set the schedule. You visit the field of remembrance as if walking into a library that knows your lineage. Books open themselves to paragraphs you did not know you needed. Some are about rest. Some are about repair. One is about the sacred art of saying less. You read until you can feel language quieting its ambition and becoming service again. You close the books and the learning remains, not as facts but as posture, a way your shoulders align with your breath so thought can travel through without scraping. A still point appears no brighter than the tip of a match, no larger than a lentil at the center of your chest. You do not seize it. You let it burn with perfect smallness. Around it, sentiments that used to escalate now dissolve. Outrage that was secretly grief is named grief and returns to the river it came from, darker but honest. Anxiety that was secretly love unclaimed becomes love claimed, which relaxes like a tremor finding ground. Your interior weather clears enough to see the horizon of choice as it is, wide, varied, generous. In this silence you negotiate with nothing. You consent. Consent is the highest leverage in the quantum field because it alters the initial conditions. A consent to gentleness collapses fewer possibilities, but they are better possibilities. A consent to truth removes entire categories of error from your future. You make these consents without ceremony. You feel how reality, reading this accurate readiness, begins to approach you with simpler offers. The higher timeline stops being a rumor and starts behaving like your address. You would think silence makes you smaller. It does not. It makes you exact. Exactness reveals where you fit without forcing you into the shape. The relief is physical. Your jaw loosens. Your spine lengthens. The muscle behind your heart stops pretending to be a shield. In this state, you can hear other lives without stealing their volume for your own. You become a vessel with a lid that fits, not to keep wonder out, but to keep essence from evaporating. The longer you sit, the more obvious it becomes that the world's real work is done by those who can listen without rehearsing their reply, without armoring their virtue, without drafting an audience. You pledge this listening to your days not as punishment, not as purity, but as craft. Craft humbles and dignifies at once. You will use fewer words and more presence. You will let presence be the sentence that doesn't need revision. When silence has washed you to the bone, a delicate pressure returns at the sternum, the wax of the prophetic seal warming, the stamp of your vow becoming legible again after much handling. You do not display it. You carry it like a letter addressed to any room you enter. Rooms, reading the seal, rearrange themselves by a fraction. A chair angled toward inclusion, a voice softened at the edge, a schedule opened by 10 clean minutes. This is influence without spectacle, authority without theater. Authority here means the authorship of your own coherence. You are not hiding in quiet, you are manufacturing accuracy. Accuracy is the only kindness that scales. From this manufacturing floor, the next sequence will not be invented. It will be released, already formed and waiting for your steadiness to make it safe. You keep the lamp low. You keep the breath honest. You keep the light behind your eyes soft enough to see by. Silence nods. Permission is granted for the next unveiling. You do not summon thunder. You choose a gentleness disciplined enough to move mountains without bruising them. Stand or sit with an easy spine, crown lifted as if a silk thread were drawing you skyward, soles or seat weighted as if the earth had made a promise to carry you and intends to keep it. Let breath arrive, unambitious and honest. On the next exhale, allow the jaw to unhook, the tongue to rest, the eyes to soften until the room gains a faint, merciful glow. Nothing dramatic is required. Accuracy is. Place your right palm over the center of your sternum and let the warmth spread like a lamp being turned slightly brighter. Place the left palm over the right, sealing the heat as one might guard a candle in wind. Here is your switch, subtle and sovereign. Without forcing a picture, acknowledge the quantum field, the way you might acknowledge a beloved entering the room not as theory, as presence. Your body will recognize the recognition it has practiced all your life for this simple honesty. On the breath in, let the phrase, "I am safe to hold more light," form silently. On the breath out, let "I am willing to release what cannot carry it" complete the circuit. 3 rounds, not as spell work but as consent. Feel how the ribcage makes room for the vow without strain. Feel how the muscles behind the heart slacken their old guard without abandoning their post. The nervous system believes what is repeated with tenderness. It is loyal to coherence more than to noise. Now attend to the light that has been waiting behind your eyes. Imagine nothing. Remember everything. The glow steadies as awareness steadies. You are not creating, you are reading. At this clarity, dormant light codes begin to stir, not as fireworks, as keys warming in locks that were never punitive, only precise. You will know the turning by ordinary signs. A thought loses its compulsion and remains as information. A grievance releases its favorite argument and remains as boundary. A desire stops impersonating destiny and returns to its true size. Let each change register. Do not narrate. Integrity has its own grammar. Bring your attention from the center of the chest to the space just beneath your navel, the repository where stamina makes its quiet home. Without strain, allow breath to descend into that room. On the inhale, sense a small pool becoming clearer. On the exhale, imagine that clarity rising to meet the lamp of the heart. A bridge forms that does not need your engineering, chest to belly, lamp to pool, brightness to depth. This bridge is how you carry radiance without burning out, how you keep fire and water married in the work that follows. Now, slowly, open your palms so they hover a few inches from the chest, as if you were holding a book whose pages are made of warmth. Angle the hands outward an inch, then back inward, as though you were reading the room of your own field. You are calibrating, not conjuring. In this small movement, you will feel the perimeter of your presence thin where it was rigid and strengthen where it leaked. Do not chase sensation. Let sensation report. Accuracy is listening refined. Silently offer 3 consents to the feel. First, let my coherence be useful beyond me. Second, let my clarity choose tasks that preserve it. Third, let my voice sound only where it can serve. These are permissions shaped like vows. You will notice how the spine lengthens as if to celebrate, and how the eyes grow steadier without glassiness. If tears arrive, allow them to be the salt that baptizes the new circuitry. The ocean recognizes its own. This is the moment to align your higher timeline without spectacle. See yourself performing one small future act while keeping your breath honest, placing a hand on a shoulder and meaning it. Declining a task that corrodes your sincerity, moving 2 chairs to widen a circle, sending the message that mends what can be mended without theater. Let the scene be simple enough to do today. Precision collapses time kindly. Choose, and let the choice choose you back. If agitation surfaces, welcome it as weather informing the shore. Return a palm to the sternum and find again the warm stamp of the prophetic seal. The seal does not demand perfection. It ensures direction. Direction is mercy in motion. Whisper to the seal what you are willing to keep, even when the room forgets why it gathered. Clean attention, kind boundaries, speech that neither flatters nor harms. Feel the wax soften under your breath, and take again the imprint of your name. When the mind attempts to sprint ahead, greet it like a faithful dog who has not yet learned he is safe to walk. Smile inwardly, slow down together. What must happen will happen more cleanly at this pace. You are not delaying the world, you are calibrating its entry through you. The observer loop will continue its exchanges. You will keep it domesticated, a servant of freedom rather than a collector of proofs. Now, enact the simplest audible rite, soft enough for your own ears to be the first and last witnesses. Whisper into the quiet, "I remember." Then type, "I remember the prophecy." Let the words be ordinary. Let the atmosphere be holy. This is not for spectacle. It is for sealant. Typed language anchors breath, chosen direction in the shared lattice where action finds you faster. Close the practice with an offering measured in inches. Shoulders ease, jaw unhooks once more. Gaze widens to include the edges of the room. Allow the hands to lower, as if setting a bright object on a table you will return to often. Rise if you were seated. Sit if you were standing. Do one small human thing: drink water, open a window, straighten a picture frame, as a sign that activation is a way of living, not a state to admire. And when you meet the first face afterward, let your presence do the speaking before any word dares the air. Between remembering and action, a path appears without announcement. You return to the center, palms quiet, breath unhurried, and feel the wax of promise warming beneath the sternum. The seal is not an emblem to display. It is a living agreement between your clarity and the world's readiness to meet it. When it softens, the imprint becomes legible again, a vow to carry light without haste, to tell truth without venom, to keep your kindness public. You are not being anointed into exception. You are consenting to precision. The seal opens by degrees, like dawn deciding the edges of things. With each small degree, coherence thickens in the body's rooms, jaw loose, brow smooth, spine lifted from within. Your thoughts no longer audition, they volunteer. The observer loop remains domesticated, returning loyally to service each time it tries to collect proofs. You do not perform holiness, you practice exactness. Exactness widens mercy's reach. The lattice you saw earlier brightens as if recognizing a signature. This is not spectacle. It is morphic resonance acknowledging a pattern it trusts. Your actions become clean instructions the grid can understand. Move 2 chairs, close the tab, drink water before speech. Choose the task that preserves sincerity. Each instruction is a syllable in the language of steadiness. The syllables compose into sentences people can live inside. You test the seal by doing the ordinary as sacrament. You answer a message without hurry. The message answers you back with ease. You bless a room by noticing what would make it kinder and doing that first. You let a boundary state itself in one calm sentence, and you do not apologize for its clarity. These are not small things when multiplied across days. They are the architecture of your higher timeline proving it belongs here. The field of remembrance feels near, as if the air had moved its chair closer. In that nearness, destiny stops performing and begins to work. Your destiny vector is visible now, not as a tunnel of inevitability but as a corridor with windows. Wherever you look through, the view invites you to remain human while you embody light. Remaining human is not a downgrade. It is the chosen container for transmission. Transmission trusts containers that don't leak. You notice how forgiveness, correctly measured, returns energy to places that can use it. You release narratives that hoarded your brightness. You keep what keeps you lucid. When confusion visits, you meet it at the door and ask it to speak slowly. It does, because respect slows everything to a comprehensible pace. Comprehension turns enemies into weather. Weather can be navigated. Now the seal offers a final clarity. Prophecy is not an elsewhere that will arrive. It is an always that requires hosts. Hosting is the art of making coherence findable. You become findable by being consistent in small ways, when nobody is looking. The grid listens for this consistency the way roots listen for water. Where you stand, the hour drinks. If you must speak, let it be to bless the exact labor ahead. The email, the meal, the apology, the refusal, the plan that keeps enough sky in it to breathe. If you must be silent, let it be so others can hear themselves become accurate. Either way, the seal holds. Either way, the future enters by the doorway of your breath and discovers there is room. What you feared would demand spectacle simply asks for fidelity. You give it. Light answers with its oldest promise to keep speaking in a language you can live. The door you feared was stone turns to air in your hand. The field has named you. Proceed as the naming